Photographer Loren Irving retraced John C. Fremont's 1843 and 1844 expedition through Oregon and Nevada. Using journals and maps from the journey, Mr. Irving photographed all 32 of Fremont's Oregon camps. He takes us to two of the campsites located near Bend.
I primarily do landscape photography, but what makes this different in doing this historical research is that sometimes the writing in the journal is so precise and so well described that I can find characteristics of locations that he writes in the journal, and so I end up trying to capture that on the film. So it's a little bit different than if you were just trying to make nice landscape shots. I'm trying to incorporate things in the images that are described in the journal. So in late May of 1843, the expedition left Westport, which is near Kansas City now, and went along what is now the Oregon Trail. And his job was to map the Oregon Trail in order to make it appear and be feasible for others to go on the Oregon Trail and come up into the Oregon Territory and settle in this part of the country, in the Northwest. Well, John Fremont was a young man that grew up in South Carolina. He went to school at Charleston College. He also married the daughter of a very powerful Senator Thomas Hart Benton. And it is that connection. Benton helped his son-in-law get this job of being on these expeditions. When he came through here in December of 1843, he was 30 years old. Pretty young man to lead a sizable expedition. So he had a lot of responsibility. This expedition consisted of 104 horses and mules and some cattle they were bringing along to feed, and 25 men, including Kit Carson and Thomas Fitzpatrick and Charles Preuss, who was the cartographer. The primary reason of mapping this Oregon Trail and providing the detail it takes to get out here on a wagon was to populate Oregon and Washington, so that the population would be such that we would not have a military conflict with the British, because they were pretty well encamped here with the Hudson's Bay Company, and there were designs by the British to have this territory. But Congress was very interested in claiming this part of the Northwest. In the November of 1843, after he had done his mission here, accomplished his work, he's sitting in the Dalles and makes a decision not to stay there, not to stay in the Dalles for the winter, but he makes a decision to move south. And they started on November 25th of 1843, and they came south, and they went through Dufur and Tye Valley and Nene Creek, and then Indian Head Canyon Camp, and then down to Sequoia Junction Camp, and Metolius, and Fly Creek, and then Wyches Creek, and then where we are after being at the Turnout Camp, where we are right now, is near Bend, which is at the Shevlin Park Camp. After passing for several miles over Artemisia Plain, the trail entered a beautiful pine forest through which we traveled for several hours, and at about 4 o'clock descended into the valley of another large branch, on the bottom of which were spaces of open pines, with occasional meadows of good grass, in one of which we camped. The stream is very swift and deep and about 40 feet wide and nearly half frozen over. Among the timber here are larches 140 feet high and over 3 feet in diameter. We had tonight the rare sight of a lunar rainbow. John Fremont and the expedition came upon this site on December 4th, 1843, and after coming in from the north, in this little kind of canyon here with Tumalo Creek behind us, the expedition camped here for one night, and they had some cattle they were bringing on along with them. They had 104 horses and mules. By this time, they were using a teepee, And so if you had come, and there were 25 men as well, plus 2 American Indian, Klamath Indian guides. So if you'd have come through here on that day, in the afternoon at least, you would have seen them putting up the teepee, several fires getting started, hobbling the horses and taking all the stuff, all the material that they used for surveying and so on out of the packs. Fremont was busy writing in his journal and getting his equipment out to hopefully have the weather be such that he could get a latitude and longitude reading at night. When he was successful in reading the latitude, he was using a telescope and timing a particular moon going around Jupiter. So he had to have some pretty good optical equipment with him to do that. Charles Preuss, at the time everyone was doing the work, was very likely on his horse and out where he could see, for instance, from down in this little canyon, and then do his drawings and his sketches of the map from what he could see. The expedition, as far as I can read in the journals, would start each day actually moving out of where they were encamped at about 10 o'clock, maybe even 11. So it took a long time, but during that time, Fitzpatrick and Carson, it's very likely that they were out in front to find a good route, if not already on a trail of some kind. So when they arrived and saw the Deschutes for the first time, it was on the day of December 5th, 1843. It'd been a few miles away from it, but they hadn't seen it yet. And as a matter of fact, when they saw it, they happened to hit the Deschutes where there's a huge amount of lava activity geologically, and there's lots of falls and rapids. And where we're going right now is we're going to go into a place called Dillon Falls, and this is right by Ryan Ranch, and we'll get a chance to see that here. Today the country was all pine forest, and beautiful weather made our journey delightful. It was too warm at noon for winter clothes, and the snow, which lay everywhere in patches through the forest, was melting rapidly. After a few hours' ride, we came upon a fine stream in the middle of the forest, which proved to be the principal branch of Fall River. It was occasionally 200 feet wide, sometimes narrowed to 50 feet, the waters very clear and frequently deep. We ascended along the river, which sometimes presented sheets of foaming cascades, its banks occasionally blackened with masses of scoriated rock, and found a good encampment on the verge of an open bottom, which had been an old camping ground for the Cayuse Indians. In all our journeying, we had never traveled through a country where the rivers were so abounding in falls, and the name of this stream is singularly characteristic. At every place where we come in the neighborhood of the river is heard the roaring of the falls. So this is a place, this is the first initial falls right here. And let's just walk down to where we can get a pretty good idea of what's going on. He talks about in his journal a scoriated basalt, and as you look at this, you can see what he's talking about, and particularly down below a little bit, we can see what he's talking about. And let's just get down here close and see how it feels to you. So I don't really think that it has changed any since he was here. There isn't much erosion of this lava, so this is the first big pitch of Dillon Falls. I think it's pretty cool that he writes about it in his journal, and we can stand here and be in a place where Fremont was in 170 some years ago. Well, this is the main stem of the Deschutes River. And in his journals, he calls it the Fall River, and it's one of the very few rivers that in the United States, it flows from the south to the north, but it does that. This is the same river that flows through Bend and makes Drake Park and Mirror Pond and what we're known for in Bend. The cartographer Charles Preuss also talks about the number of falls along this area that they were in. So we're at Dillon, we're at the upper end of Dillon Falls on the Deschutes here, and they camped right at the upper end of this, just about 200 yards, 300 yards around. There's a nice big meadow that's now called Ryan Ranch. And it was in this clearing that Fremont expedition camped the night of December 5th. At some point, John Fremont discovered a hole in the rocks, and in this meadow where the water was draining, he said at the time there was almost a small stream, and it was draining down into the lava rocks in the lava tubes below. And he made a notation of that in his journal, and he called it an entonnoir, but I think it was the wrong spelling because the French word is entonnoir with no T in it, whatever difference that makes. But he made a comment that long ago, that hole is still here. This is also where John Fremont made a comment in his journal that they happened to see a set of freshly peeled lodgepole poles for a teepee. And we found here a handsome set leaning against one of the trees, very white and cleanly scraped. Had the owners been here, we would have purchased them, but as they were not, we merely left the old ones in their place with a small quantity of tobacco. And it's crossed my mind, and we've talked about it a couple of times, how long it would take to peel the bark off of lodgepole poles. So for the American Indians that were here that had prepared those, and then to come back and find some old ones. So he didn't make any friends with that particular thing. Then they went south and went eventually down to Upper Klamath Marsh, and then he turned east to a place that he named Winter Ridge and Summer Lake. There's a lake here called Summer Lake, and then he went in a circuitous route down through Warner Valley and out through into Nevada. After this trip was made, the information was published in a report called the Report of this Expedition, and some 10,000 copies were made, and almost every major wagon train that came out from back here in Missouri out to Oregon after 1845 and also towards the California country had this report with them and this map.